Welcome back to Fullerton College's Print 145 Variable Data Imaging class. This is your instructor, Ben Hewitt, and we're going to continue looking at Microsoft Excel, and more importantly, data formats that actually work for what we're doing here. So let's get into this. Last time we talked about the ideas of rows and columns and cells and how you put in different parts of information into your Excel sheets, or how your customers should be doing it, that we're going to use to integrate and create some really cool printing projects. Anyways, first off, let's look at the general layout here so you can get a sense. This is a sample list that I got from the XMPy people who actually use this on one of the test projects that some of you have done in some of my other classes, and we'll probably start out with doing a little bit on in this class. Anyways, looking at the formatting, you'll notice that data is always in columns of like things. So the first names are all in one column. Last names are all in one column. Address 1 is in one column. Address 2 is one column. City, state, zip, phone numbers, emails, all of these sorts of things all come down columns. Rows, somebody do that, just click on them, sorry, there you go. So a column like the first name column, column A, has all the people's first names. But if you're talking about rows, each row has one person's information. So row 2, starting with Jane Jones on 9 Mayflower Drive in Plymouth, Massachusetts. Sounds like a nice place to live. You can see that all of her information goes together in one line across in one row. Columns are like information, rows are connected information. The other of the Jones families also living at the same address, Jerry, Jennifer, and Jimmy. They went and did the thing where they all have the same names. How cute of them. All of these things, each person has their own row of information. Sometimes the information can be the same since these 4 people are living in the same place and they all have the same last name, but other things like their mobile numbers and their emails all come through unique. So that's rows versus columns. You'll also notice that the first row across the top does not have names. It has column headers. Each one of these has something that says what's in that column. The first one is first name, then last name, address 1, 2, city, state, zip. The header column is very important to variable data input systems. The integration system will actually be using that first column to name the variable data input. We're going to look at this more in detail when we get into actually running XMPy. For now, take my word for it. It needs to be a named column that needs to start with a letter or number and cannot start with a space. If any of these things had, let's just delete this for a second, for instance, had no header, there's a blank spot here, that will actually cause a lot of the variable data systems to crash. Data needs a column header. It's necessary because it's not about you knowing what it is. We humans can look at this series of data here without the word state at the top. If we look through this, we see all these 2-letter codes, MACTFLCA, and we recognize those as postal abbreviations for states. A computer may or may not notice that correlation. Likewise, if we got rid of last name and you just saw that it said Jones a couple times, the computer may not realize that those are specific separate records and might just say, why does it say this so many times? Same goes for address. It is okay, however, let me open this up, to have an empty data set below a properly filled out top. Address 2 typically is where you put things like apartment numbers, unit numbers, PO box numbers if they happen to be there, in addition to the normal street address in address 1. These are broken up in a special way because this lets you control the data more specifically when you put it onto a mailer address section on a postcard or some other type of variable data project. Splitting the data into smaller chunks is better than keeping it in one big chunk. Some of the worst data I've ever seen is when they put everything into one column. The column just says contacts, and inside the column it says first name, the person's first name. We'll just use one here because it's easier to say. For instance, it would just be one big gigantic cell that says Jane Jones, 9 Mayflower Drive, all the way through the phone numbers. And you can't exactly use that data for anything more than just dropping that data in as it is in one place. But by having it subdivided into individual categories of data, You're able to work with things like their gender, their date of birth, in this case, the model of their cell phone and their club level, and all sorts of little specific personal details that matter depending on where you're going with the project. In fact, let's put it the other direction. The amount of detail you have in your data is the amount of controlled variability you can have in your final output. If you have information about whether they prefer dogs or cats, you can include that in your variable data printout and even use it to trigger pictures of dogs or cats, knowing that they're going to prefer to see one over the other. The technology can do it, but if the data is just first name, last name, address, there's no way to know if they're a puppies or a kittens person, or even if they're both. You'll never know based off just your address. Most of the time, the data a client supplies is just going to be names and addresses and phone numbers. And it gets a little tricky trying to be creative and fun with such minimal information, but I promise we will do that in this class too. We'll figure out how to eke something interesting out of bare minimums of data, because otherwise you got some pretty boring campaigns ahead of you. You got to be able to be a little creative and figure out how to integrate more cool things out of, again, minimal input from a client, because you're not likely going to see more than that. Anyways, what I was getting at here was you can have address 2 as a column, and for the first 4 people, they don't have an apartment number. That's okay. It won't crash any systems. The systems are built to do that. But if I got rid of the word address 2, then that whole column would crash and the job would become unprintable. It's weird. That's how it works. Let's see what else I wanted to see here with you guys. So we have our rows, we have our columns. The headers are very important. They will become the names of the variable data inputs in XMPy. When you get in there and you start plugging them into your program, you're going to see that these different things show up as possibilities. Once again, like we talked about last time, even if you can't see the whole thing, if you click on a cell up at the top here, you can see that the whole phone number is in there, even though it's not all there visibly in the cell. Let's go for the emails as well. Some of these, especially down here, get long. Rachel@net.com. And yes, these are fake names and addresses in case you can't tell. All these 555 numbers should give it away. So these different bits like Rachel@net.com, you can't see the whole thing down here in the spreadsheet, but worry not, it's visible up here. And while you can expand this stuff down here, at some point, you kind of have to learn to see the spreadsheet for what it is. If there are problems, you can go in and look for issues, but it's better to be able to just leave them collapse. To the computer, it doesn't matter again. So as long as the data is in the cell, the computer will be able to find it and input it. It could be a whole paragraph and it would still do the same job when you integrate into XMPy or other variable data softwares. Anyways, this has been our brief little look into a properly formatted data mailing list for some clients of a fictional company so that you can learn how to navigate Excel. I will put this file up on the class site so you can download it and look at it as well. Your first project assignment will involve playing with this in XMPy for a simple plug and play type system. Anyways, again, thanks for watching and listening. This has been with Fullerton College's Printing Technology Department. This has been Print 145, Variable Data.